Just going to give a quick overview of the bioelectronic medicine industry, what's been happening. We also just very recently updated our market research report, which is called the Market for Bioelectronic Medicine. There's information on the report outside in the lobby, and Heather can tell you more about it. But I'm going to share some data from that report. And I want to thank my collaborators, Jeremy Koff, Victor Peikoff, who were very helpful in coming up with forecasts for the industry. Also want to thank Jojo Platt, our contributor, and Heather Varan, who I think many of you saw coming in the room. We have one other contributor, Sharina Rice, who is with us on Zoom, and we may be hearing from her later today. So here's a quick snapshot of the bioelectronic medicine industry. And as you can see here, we're segmenting the industry in a couple of different parts. The orange part is what we call the emerging indications. So this is conforms to a more restrictive definition of bioelectronic medicine that we have been using, that other organizations, including the NIH, and I believe the Feinstein as well, in terms of neuromodulation to affect an end organ. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But other people have looked at bioelectronic medicine in a more general way, to include neuromodulation, to include a lot of applications outside of organ stimulation, including CNS, brain stimulation, spinal cord stimulation. So again, if you take that more broad definition of bioelectronic medicine, then you have a current market that's in excess of $20 billion today, growing to over 35 million by 2028. But let's take a closer look at the segments. So this core segment of the bioelectronic medicine industry, which talks about organ stimulation, electrical stimulation or ultrasound or magnetic stimulation that affects an end organ, is about a $1.6 billion industry. And this is what we refer to as the emerging indications. But then if you want to add to that traditional neuromodulation and you add chronic pain, which is currently the biggest segment of the neuromodulation market, well, that adds about $3 billion to the market. Now, if you want to add in neuroprosthetics, for instance, cochlear implants, that adds another $1.92 billion. And then if we start adding other forms of neuromodulation, including brain neuromodulation, well, that adds another $2 billion. So you can see as you expand our definitions, and then finally the biggest segment so far is what people in the cardiac device industry would call CRM. Technically, that's electrical stimulation affecting an end organ. That's about a $15 billion market. So add it all up, and again, depending on your definition, you've got a pretty big market. So I want to talk a little bit about what we see as the distinctions between neuromodulation and bioelectronic medicine. And again, people use the two terms interchangeably, but we see some differentiation, which is one of the reasons why we launched a separate publication called the Bioelectric Business Report. And by the way, everyone should have received a copy of our latest issue in the email. If you didn't get that this morning, let me know and we'll make sure you get a copy of it. But again, the way we have been treating the market is that neuromodulation, traditional neuromodulation, the target is the CNS, either the brain or the spinal cord, and the indications are pain, Parkinson's disease, epilepsy, et cetera. And the people working in that field are neural engineers. Obviously, the clinicians can be neurosurgeons or neurologists, or in many cases, PM&R, if we're looking at neurorehabilitation applications. And it's traditional medtech industry. And the revenue model for traditional neuromodulation is you sell the device. You get a CPT code and you get hopefully reimbursed by Medicare or by private insurance. Things change a little bit as we start looking at bioelectronic medicine, because now the targets can really go beyond the CNS. The target could be the heart or the bowel and bladder or lungs or liver. The indications expand outside of chronic pain and outside of movement disorders. So you could be looking at heart failure or OAB or OSA, obstructive sleep apnea, inflammation, hypertension. The personnel, yes, you still have neural engineers who are involved with designing the systems, but now you're reaching out to a broader range of clinicians, which could include cardiologists and electrophysiologists, internists, urologists. And again, you still have medtech executives who are active in this industry. But again, bioelectronic medicine is kind of straddling a middle ground between the medical device industry and the pharmaceutical industry, which again is one of the reasons why we launched the new publication. And one of the reasons why we're here in New York is to grow the industry. We believe that the pharmaceutical industry has to take a bigger interest in alternatives to drugs. And one of the reasons why we invited our keynote speaker, Dr. Helen Mayberg, to speak on this topic, because she, as much as anyone, understands that in many cases, pharmaceutical therapies simply are not enough. So we'll be interested to hear. In terms of the revenue model, yes, you still have device sales going on in bioelectronic medicine, but the revenue model might change. And there may be, already have been companies experimenting with pay per dose rather than sell the device. So we're going to talk a little bit more about reimbursement models and revenue models in our last session of the day, which Jeremy Koff will be moderating. So I think that's going to be an interesting topic of discussion. Again, what are some of the targets that we're looking at in bioelectronic medicine? Well, clearly the vagus nerve is one of the key targets. One of the initial targets that the NIH and DARPA both were highlighting in their seminal programs. But you have other companies targeting the hypoglossal nerve in the case of OSA indications, the sacral nerve in case of OAB indications, but also the tibial nerve and saphenous nerve and a whole bunch of other nerves. So largely we're looking at we're looking at peripheral nerve targets. A little bit about some of the competition and some of the segments that we talk about in our market report. So the urological market is a big one, and currently Medtronic is the biggest player. They have been on the market with their InterStim product, which has gone through several iterations. I think InterStim X is the newest version of their product. They have both an IPG, a battery powered, and a rechargeable version of their products. But there's a new player called Axonics. That's the company in the orange. And then within a few years, we're going to see some other players. There's also companies, smaller segments, doing tibial nerve stimulation, either percutaneously or non-invasive tibial nerve stimulation. And then there's a company called Nuspera that we expect to be on the market soon with a intervention for OAB. Some of the things we're going to be talking about in upcoming sessions. After our keynote talk from Dr. Mayberg, we're going to have a panel devoted to the investment climate for bioelectronic medicine. And Jojo Platt will be moderating that session. And then we're going to have a session talking about the enteric nervous system. And this is, I think, a new area and a very fascinating area for potential development and growth of the bioelectronic medicine industry. Victor Peikoff, again, one of our contributors for the bioelectronic medicine newsletter, he'll be moderating a session on closed loop stimulation. And finally, as I mentioned, Jeremy Koff will have a session later this afternoon dedicated to reimbursement and new revenue models. So just a little bit about us. We were launched in 2001. So yes, it's our 22nd year of operation. We started with the Neurotech Business Report newsletter, which is still published today and covers the traditional neuromodulation industry. We launched the Bioelectrics Business Report in 2021. So we're in our third year in that publication. We also produce a database of neuromodulation products in conjunction with INS, the International Neuromodulation Society. So if you're an INS member, you have access to that database, or if you visit our website. We also perform market research and, of course, conferences such as this. And we do some publishing. Again, this is the people who've helped us out. Jennifer French we'll be hearing from later on this morning. Is with us on Zoom. Susan Schaefer, who is a consulting editor for us, helped us launch the new publication. And for those who aren't familiar with her, she was formerly the editor of BioCentury, which is the leading industry newsletter in the pharmaceutical industry. So I want to thank Jennifer and Jeremy and Jojo and Susan and Victor for your contributions to the publication and your contributions to these meetings. So that's kind of concludes my talk. Happy to take some questions